We are so delighted to finally have this piece coming to our stage. This has been in the planning stages since pre-COVID. It got postponed several times. We're so thrilled to finally have it and to be collaborating with our friends and colleagues over at Temple Israel. Enjoy a Bintel brief.
Guten Abend. Good evening, aber gesund. Ich bin so zufrieden zu sehen, ihr alle. I am so delighted to see all of you here. It is so gratifying to see so many new faces and a few familiar ones. You, I knew would come. You, I did not expect. But welcome, and thank you for joining us. I am Avram Kahan, the first editor of the Jewish Daily Forward, and I am here to share with you a few of the many thousand letters received by our advice column over many, many years. We called the Daily Forward's advice column a Bintel brief, which means, in Yiddish, a bundle of letters. Each of these briefings reminds us of the courage of the bewildered Eastern European Jewish immigrants who sought refuge in America and of the dilemmas that faced their children. I beg you to remember that real human beings, finding themselves strangers in a new land, were desperate for good advice or just a kind and understanding word. The column ran for 80 years in response to readers seeking support in their own language, which they could trust in the face of new problems and challenges. It caught on quickly. The letters awakened in the immigrants of the Lower East Side a desire to unburden their hearts, to reveal their own problems. In 1906, and for the first few years, I answered all the letters myself, and so many that at times I could barely keep up. Even choosing the ones I wanted to share with you was no easy task. But I did it with the greatest pleasure. For in these letters we can see a rare panorama of human souls over many decades of what we call Yiddishkeit.
1908. Worthy and the have pity on me and my two slots of food and
My wife died.
Dear Anna, 1906. Honorable Editor, I have received
Dear editor.
1909. Dear Editor, 1910. Dear Editor, 1934. Worthy Editor.
Dear editor, I want your opinion about...
1910. Dear editor, I want to ask you some advice in my situation. I recently met a fine girl. She has a flaw, however, that keeps me from marrying her. The fault is that she has a dimple in her chin. And it is said that people who have this lose their first husband or wife. At first, I laughed at the idea, but later it began to bother me. I began to observe people with dimpled chins and found out that their first husbands or wives really had died prematurely. Now, whenever I see someone with this defect, I ask about it immediately, and I find out that some of the men have lost their first wives, and some of the women's first husbands are dead. This upset me so that I don't know what to do. I cannot leave my sweetheart. I love her very much, but I'm afraid to marry her, lest I die because of the dimple. I've questioned many people. Some say it's true, others laugh at the idea. Perhaps you too will laugh at me for being such a fool and believing such nonsense. But I cannot rest until I hear your opinion about it. I want to add that my sweetheart knows nothing about this. Respectfully, the unhappy fool.
The tragedy is not that the girl has a dimple in her chin, but that some people have a screw loose in their heads. One would need the knowledge of a genius to explain how a dimple in the chin could drive a husband or wife to the grave. Does the angel of death sit hiding in a dimple? It seems to us that it is a beauty spot, and we never imagined it could house the devil. It is tragic humor to find such superstition in the world today. It is truly shameful that a young man who was brought up in America should ask such questions. To calm him, we wish to tell him we know many people with such dimples who have not lost their first husbands or wives, but live out their years together in great happiness.
1906. Honorable Editor, I have a grievous wound in my heart, and maybe through the Bintel brief I will find relief. I am a young woman. I was happily married, but a year ago, death suddenly took my husband. He was handsome and I am considered attractive. We often heard the comment, what a good-looking couple. We were in love and faithful to each other. When I was left alone with our only daughter, 15 years of age, my world collapsed. I cried till my eyes were swollen. When they laid my dear husband in the coffin and took it out of the house, I fainted 4 times. In the carriage to the cemetery, my husband's best friend was with me, and I sat in a daze. Then they covered my husband's coffin. I became hysterical, screamed and tried to stop them. Finally, they dragged me away from the grave and calmed me down. My husband's friend did not leave my side. He is not as handsome as my husband, and I had never thought it, and had never shown the least interest in me as a woman, and I had never thought of him as anything other than a friend. Suddenly this changed. During the drive home from the cemetery, I was alone in the carriage with him. I began to cry again, and he comforted me, patted my hands, and begged me not to endanger my health. As if in a dream, I thought, is this not more than friendly sympathy? Is this perhaps the interest of a man for a woman? In my sorrow and confusion, I did not know what was happening to me. As he comforted me, a friend began to kiss my hands. With tears in his eyes, he stroked my hair and swore he felt toward his dead friend's wife as toward an unhappy sister. He drew me to him and kissed me passionately. Again and again I heard words of love from him, and I had no will to protest. I felt like a sinner. When I got home, I was afraid to look my daughter in the eyes. I imagined I heard my husband calling me a hypocrite and saying my tears were false. The next morning, my husband's friend came to my house. He cried bitterly and told me he felt like a traitor, but he loved me so much he would waste away if I did not become his. Dear editor, I am a weak woman. I could not fight against these passionate pleas and kisses. I was helpless, and I told him I would marry him in 1 year. But I feel guilty. My daughter, with tears in her eyes, blurted out that her father's grave was not an hour old when I already had taken a new bridegroom. Her words hurt me, and I had no answer. But in time, she has accepted him. My close friends advised me to marry my husband's friend, and I will do so because I know he will be good to us. But I would like your opinion on all that has happened to me. Sincerely, B.V.
The woman's excuse that she was unable to protest against the passionate advances of her husband's friend is a weak one. Better if she had opened the carriage door and asked him to get out. There is no excuse for the disgusting behavior of the young man. He should not have acted so shamefully after his friend's death. It is possible that the widow is making a mistake in deciding to marry him because it is doubtful whether she can be happy with such a man.
1921. Dear Editor, I write this letter because I want your opinion about the behavior of a woman that I am acquainted with who belongs to progressive groups and considers herself a radical. Not long ago, the couple invited me to their home and I spent a pleasant evening with them. When it was time to eat supper, everyone went into the dining room to sit at the table, and the woman who works for them ate in the kitchen. Since I know the couple considered themselves to be radical people, I wondered why the servant didn't eat with us and everyone else in the dining room. I took the liberty of telling my friend she ought to invite the woman to eat with us at the table along with everyone. Then my friend answered, but it has to be this way. The woman who works for us must eat separately. For me, this is not the right answer. And it seems that one of us does not seem to understand the ethics and the morals of the socialist standpoint. Therefore, I would like you to explain to us which one is right. With socialist regards, Arita.
We are in agreement with the writer and not with her friend. Progressive people should not discriminate between the servant and the members of the family. When everyone eats in the dining room and the maid is left sitting in the kitchen, they are wronging her because this is degrading.
1955. Worthy friend editor, my wife and I work very hard at our candy store, and we're open 7 days a week and 16 hours a day. We make a living. And during the past 15 years we've been in business, we've saved enough money to buy ourselves a small house. 2 years ago, my daughter, who's finishing her studies to become a nurse, bought me an art kit for my birthday. A box with pencils and various paints that artists use. She gave me this present because she knows that over 20 years ago, I used to like drawing and painting. She told me I should try to paint again, but not to copy other pictures. And since I'm a little nervous, my daughter thought that this would calm my nerves. I was overjoyed with the gift. And in the limited time that I could tear myself apart from the store, I began to paint and draw from nature and from life. I also managed to go to art school for a week, and it's impossible to describe my pleasure. I painted a lot during these 2 years, and some of my pictures have been accepted at exhibitions. There was even a write-up about me in the English-speaking newspaper. I set up my studio for working in the basement, between the cases of salsa, the boxes of candy, and other things. I paint late at night, too, after we close the store. Not long ago, a rich businessman for whom I buy merchandise for the store saw a picture of mine. And since he liked it, he invited me to his luxurious home. And to show me his artistic wall paintings called murals. Now, he asked me if I'd be able to paint such murals. And I must confess to you that I almost cried, because I was sure that I could. I later showed the businessman some wall paintings I'd made for a neighbor of mine, and now he wants me to paint several murals in his home. And he tells me that I would be able to make a living painting murals. My wife, daughter, and friends too think I should begin to devote myself to painting only, and I want to hear your opinion on this. Painting is my whole life. But I'm already 55 years of age, and perhaps it's too late for one to become a professional painter of murals. With thanks for your answer, Ella.
You are still far from being old, and it is never too late to accomplish something. We could list names here of many people who, in their late years, achieved a great deal in various fields and became famous. Meanwhile, however, you should not give up the store. It would be good, though, if you could hire someone to help you in the business, so that you could devote more time to painting. You must not give up the painting that gives meaning to your life and brings you so much pleasure. This is, for you, a newly discovered treasure that is priceless.
"1914. Dear Editor, I am a girl 22 years of age, but I've already seen a great deal in my life. By the time I was 3 years old, I had already lost my parents. Grandmother took me in and soon gave me away to a poor tailor's wife. Then I grew up. I learned from the tailor how to do hand sewing and machine sewing too. Then my grandmother died. She left me her small house. The rabbi sold it, and he gave me the money. In time, one of the tailor's apprentices fell in love with me, and I did not reject his love. He was a fine, honest young man and a good earner. Soon, my bridegroom came to me with an idea that we should go to America. And I agreed. In America, my bridegroom immediately started to work, and he supported me. He was faithful and devoted. For example, once, during the summer, in the terrible heat, I slept on the roof. But it started to rain, and I was soaked, and I had to be taken to the hospital. I could only be saved by a blood transfusion. My bridegroom gave me his blood, and so I am recovered. In time, I went to work at the famous triangle factory. My bridegroom got a job there too. Even at work, he wanted to be with me. We will both work hard for a while, he said, and then we will be married. Then there was the terrible fire, who took 147 blossoming young lives. When the fire broke out, the screaming, the yelling, the panic, it all bewildered me. I saw the angel of death before me, and my voice was choked in my throat. Suddenly someone seized me and carried me out of the shop. When I recovered, I saw my bridegroom near me. I was in the street, rescued. And then I looked up, and I saw my girlfriends jumping out of the windows, and my bridegroom said, I must save the other girls. That was the last time that I saw my bridegroom alive. This is the 4th year that I am alone, and I still see the terrible scenes before me. I still see my bridegroom's face, and I still see the burnt face in the morgue also. I am weak and nervous, yet there is now a man who wants to marry me. But I made a vow that I would never get married. And I am afraid that I will never be able to love another man. But this young man doesn't want to leave me. And my friends try to persuade me to marry him, and they say everything will be all right. But I do not believe it. everything cannot be all right for me. Only in the grave. I decided to write to you because I wanted to hear your opinion. Respectfully, a faithful reader.
It is senseless for this girl to sacrifice her life in memory of a faithful bridegroom, since this would not bring him back to life. What the earth covers must be forgotten. She has suffered enough in her life already and is advised to take herself in hand and begin her life anew.
Teufel trippet chalk, brennt a fire,
By the fireside, where the
Woman,
embers glow,
du bist hell.
through the wintry days.
Und die Rebe lehren kleine Kinderlach.
There the
Then
teacher softly,
Aleph
with the little ones, chants the olive base.
Und die Rebe lehren kleine Kinderlach. Denn Aleph ist. Welcher Kinderlach älter wären,
When you are older grown,
wird allen verstehen.
you will understand for yourselves
Wie viel in die Oisios liegen Tränen,
the pain that
und
lies
wie
within these
viel
letters
Gewinn.
and the tears that
Wie
fall.
viel in die Oisios liegen Tränen, und wie viel Gewinn.
1909. Worthy editor. I often spend time with a group of 40 people, 30 men and 10 women. Among them are religious and non-religious people, and we do not pass the time in idle discussions. Recently, we read a report in a newspaper about the movement to give women the right to vote. And for the past few weeks, we have been carrying on a debate about it. I am one of the group that is in favor of giving women full rights. But most of the others are against it. They argue that it would be very bad to let the women get to the ballot box because that would destroy family life. The woman would then no longer be the housewife and the mother to her children, the wife to her husband. In a word, everything would be destroyed. A woman must not mix in politics, they say. She was created to be dependent on man, obey him, love him, supply all his comforts, and be a mother to his children. Then the question arises, must the woman then be considered a slave and the man the master? Isn't it obvious that women in many cases show themselves to be cleverer than men? These same people who recently celebrated the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln for having freed the Negro slaves now talk with a satirical grin about women's freedom. Just as the opponents of the socialist movement point out that socialism will be harmful, so those who argue against voting rights for women say that this will destroy family life. This is not so, because a woman is a human being, just like a man. The capabilities that women have already shown confirm this. Plenty of facts can be cited from the past, and if women are recognized as human beings, they must also be granted all the rights of human beings. I think if women are considered beings, human beings with all their rights, then family life would be better and richer. With socialist regards,
The arguments against the opponents of women's rights are very good ones. The fact is that many intelligent women are already taking part in various activities and they still remain excellent homemakers. Justice can reign among people only when they all have equal rights. Those men who are opposed to giving women the same rights they possess are acting from tyrannical instincts because they actually want to rule the women.
1908. Worthy editor, have pity on me and my 2 small children and print my letter in the foreword. Max, the children and I now say farewell to you. You left us in such a terrible state. You had no compassion for us. For 6 years I loved you faithfully, took care of you like a loyal servant. I never had a happy day with you. And yet I forgive you for everything. Have you ever asked yourself why you left us? Max, where is your conscience? You used to have sympathy for the forsaken women and say their terrible plight was due to the men who left them in dire need. And how did you act? I was a young, educated, and decent girl when you took me. You lived with me for 6 years, during which time I bore you 4 children. And then you left me. Of the 4 children, only 2 of them remain, but you have made them orphans. Who will bring them up? Who will support us? Have you no pity for your own flesh and blood? Consider what you are doing. My tears choke me and I cannot write more. Be advised that in several days I am leaving with my 2 living orphans for Russia. We say farewell to you and beg you to take pity on us and send us enough to live on. Your deserted wife and children.
Wife and mother is encouraged to stay in America, where she may discover strength and independence. There is assistance, charities, and aid bureaus, including the Jewish Information Agency, available to her. Your children will benefit from the life you make them in your new country.
1910. Dear editor, so my conscience does not bother me, I ask you whether a wife should have the right to go to school 2 evenings a week. My husband says I do not have such a right. I admit I cannot be satisfied just being a wife and a mother. My house and my children, they are not neglected, and I go to school now 2 evenings a week. But my husband is not pleased, and when I come home at night, he makes me stand outside a long time ringing the bell before he comes and answers the door. Now he has announced a new decision. He will count out every penny he gives me for the house, so I feel not have enough to send the laundry out anymore. He says, when I cannot send it out and I have to do the work myself, then I will not have time for such foolishness as going to school. I told him I can do my own washing and I will still find time for study. But when I am alone with my thoughts, I wonder, maybe I should not go to school. My husband is an intelligent man. He wanted to marry an educated woman. The fact that he is intelligent makes me more annoyed with him. He believes in the emancipation of women, and yet he acts contrary to his beliefs. I remain your reader, the discontented wife.
Since the husband is intelligent and an adherent of the women's emancipation movement, he is scolded severely for wanting to keep his wife so enslaved. The wife absolutely has the right to go to school 2 evenings a week.
1908. Dear editor, I am the unfortunate who, for many years, has suffered from the workers' disease. The times and conditions have taught me to be patient and to endure the pain. I am the grandfather of a 3-year-old little girl, a clever, pretty child who attracts everyone's attention, and all who know my child hug and kiss her. But I may not. I know this all too well, yet I cannot help myself from kissing my little girl. Every time I hold the child in my arms and kiss her, my conscience bothers me. I promise myself I will not do it again, but I cannot overcome my weakness. This bothers me more than the suffering from consumption, because I know that I am infecting an innocent child. Every time I kiss the child, I feel my wife's eyes on me as if she wants to shout murderer. But she doesn't utter a word. Only her face reddens, and then I feel the battle going on within her. She compresses her lips, remains silent. She tries to keep my granddaughter, away from me, though she doesn't want me to hurt her. My wife's suffering just deepens my pain. What can I do when I cannot control myself? I beg you to advise me how to act. Thank you in advance. An unhappy grandmother.
It is heartbreaking for us to have to tell this unhappy grandfather, control yourself. Do not kiss your dear child. This is the only advice we can give him. He must discipline himself. The grandfather could live a long life with this ailment. With good treatment, consumptives can live out their years. He might yet live to have great pleasure from his little granddaughter.
Dear Editor, I was born and raised in New York of parents who have read the forward for all these years, and since I always spoke Yiddish in the house and went to a Yiddish school, I can write this letter to you in Yiddish. I'm 27 years of age and the mother of a 5-year-old. I have a dear, good husband, and we enjoy a happy family life. A few years ago, we bought a nice house in a good neighborhood, and everything is as fine as can be. But I come to you to complain about my mother-in-law, who is 2 years short of 50, but she is too modern for me. I am an old-fashioned woman. When I disagree with her, she tells me we ought to change places. A few years ago, my mother-in-law lost her husband, and then a few months ago, she fell ill, and my husband talked her into giving up her home and moving in with us.
Since my husband is her only son and she has no one else, she's happy to be living with us. I love my husband. I love and respect my mother-in-law. But we are from two opposite worlds. I like to stay home evenings, to read a book, to sew or knit. I do not smoke or play cards, and strong drinks do not appeal to me. My mother-in-law, however, likes all of these things. I keep my home in good order. I like every corner to be clean and everything in place. I get up early and begin immediately to clean my house. I get dressed. Even at home, I like to be dressed like a lady. My mother-in-law likes to sleep late. And the moment she gets up, she has a cigarette hanging out of her mouth. Wherever one looks, one sees the ashes and the stubs. She never makes her bed, and her room is always a mess. She doesn't get dressed. She sits down in her bathrobe with her black coffee by the television set. Later, she begins to phone her friends to go to the beauty parlor. She recently became a blonde. Then they go to cocktail parties, or they play cards until late into the night. Lately, she started bringing her group of card players to my home, and this I cannot stand. I have to spend days cleaning up after them. I don't want to hurt my husband, and I don't want an argument with my mother-in-law. But something must be done, and I ask you for your advice. Respectfully, the old-fashioned daughter-in-law.
When we read your letter, it really seemed to us that you and your mother-in-law had changed roles. Usually, a mother-in-law has these complaints about her daughter-in-law. In your case, it is just the opposite. We feel that the fairest way to solve the problem is for your mother-in-law to move out and make a home for herself. If she wants to be near you and your children, your child, she can live in the neighborhood. She's still a young woman and should not have given up her own home. Since she knew well that you conduct your life so differently from hers, she should understand that you could not live together. Talk this over with your husband first, and then you should both explain warmly and kindly to your mother-in-law why it is not practical for her to live with you.
1941. Dear editor, my husband and I came from Galicia to America right after we were married, 33 years ago. At home, I received a secular education, and my husband was ordained as a rabbi. However, he did not want to be a rabbi here, and since we brought a little money from home, we bought a small business and made a good living. My husband is religious, but not a fanatic. I am more liberal, but I go to shul with him on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Our 5 children received a Jewish education. We always kept a Jewish home and a kosher kitchen. Our eldest son is now a college teacher, and he earns a good deal of money. He lives in a fine neighborhood, he is married and has 2 children, and we visit them often. So it happened on Christmas Eve. We decided to drop in on them, and I called up, and my daughter-in-law warmly invited us over. When we opened the door and went into the dining room, we saw a large Christmas tree, which my son was busy trimming with the help of his 2 children. When my husband saw this, he turned white. The two children were greeting us with Merry Christmas, and we were they were delighted to see us. I wanted to take off my coat, but my husband gave me the signal we were leaving immediately. Well, I had to leave at once, and our sons and daughters pleading and talking didn't help because my husband didn't want to stay there another minute. He is so angry at our son over the Christmas tree, he never wants to cross the threshold again. My son justifies himself by saying that they took in the tree so the children did not feel embarrassed with their non-Jewish neighbors in the neighborhood. He assures us it has nothing to do with religion, and he feels his father has no right to be angry. My husband is a Cohen, and besides having a temper, he is stubborn. But I don't want him to be angry at us, son. Therefore, I would like your opinion on this matter. With great respect, Arita from the Bronx.
The national American holidays are celebrated here with love and joy by Jews and Gentiles alike. But Christmas is the most religious Christian holiday, and Jews should have nothing to do with it. Jews, religious or not, should respect the Christmas holiday, but to celebrate it would be like dancing at a stranger's wedding. It is natural that the Jew who observes all the Jewish traditions should be opposed to seeing his son and grandchildren trimming a Christmas tree. But you must not quarrel with his son. It is actually your husband's fault, because he probably did not instill the Jewish traditions in his son. Instead of being angry with him, he should talk to his son and explain the meaning of Christmas.
1910. Worthy editor, my husband deserted me and our 3 small children, leaving us in desperate need. I was left without a bit of bread for the children, with debts in the groceries and the butchers, and last month's rent unpaid. I'm not complaining so much about his abandoning us, but about the grief and suffering of our children who beg for food which I cannot give them. I am young and healthy, and I am able and willing to work for my children, but unfortunately I am tied down because I am expecting. I looked for an institution which will take care of the baby, but my friends advise against it. The local Jewish welfare agencies are allowing me and my children to die of hunger. And this is because my faithful husband brought me over from Canada just 4 months ago. So therefore, I do not yet deserve to eat their bread. It breaks my heart. But I have come to the conclusion that in order to save my innocent children from hunger and cold, I have to give them away. I will sell my beautiful children to people who will give them a home. I will sell my children not for money, but for bread, for a secure home where they will have enough food and warm clothing for the winter. I, the unhappy young mother, am willing to sign a contract with my heart's blood, stating that the children belong to the people who give them a good home. Those who are willing and able to give my children a home can apply to me. Respectfully, Mrs. P., Chicago.
What kind of society are we living in that forces a mother with such desperate straits that there is no other way out than to sell her 3 children for a piece of bread? Isn't this enough to kindle a hellish fire of hatred in every human heart for such a system? The first to be damned is the heartless father, but who knows what's wrong with him? Perhaps he too is unhappy. We hope, though, that this letter will reach him and he will return to aid them. We also ask our friends and readers to take an interest in this unfortunate woman and to help her so that she herself can be the mother to her children.
Schlaf, meine Kinder, mein treues, mein
Sleep, my
Schöner,
child, my
schlaf,
comfort, my beauty. Sleep, you.
Schlaf, mein Leben, mein Kaddisch,
Sleep, my life,
schlaf,
my Kaddish. Sleep, little son.
Werde will sie's den
Your
am
mother sits
Arm,
at your
singt
cradle,
ein Lied und
sings a song and
weint.
weeps.
Wesser wohl verstehen
One day,
so
You will
nah,
understand her
was
weeping
hat
and what she
gemeint.
thought.
Das Amerika ist für jeden,
They say
sagt man
America is a joy for everyone.
Und für jeden
And for Jews,
gerne Eden,
It's a
es
paradise.
ernannte. Bis
Something
es
of a rarity.
das gute Quittel, schlafsche so nu. Schlaf
Sleep, little son.
so tain of
Sleep is a
Mittel,
good remedy.
schlafsche lu.
Sleep, you.
Schlaf, lu.
Sleep, you.
Schlaf, lu.
Sleep, sleep, you.
1930. Dear editor, I come to you with my family problem because I think you are the only one who can give me practical advice. I come to America when I was very young. I suffered plenty, but that didn't keep me from falling in love with the girl of my dreams from my hometown and marrying her. I harnessed myself to the wagon of life and pulled with all my strength. My wife was faithful, and she gave me a hand in pulling the wagon. The years flew fast, and before we looked around, we were parents of 4 children who brightened and sweetened our lives. The children were dear and smart. We gave them an education that was more than we could afford. They went to college, became professionals, and were well established. Suddenly, I feel as if the floor has collapsed under my feet. I don't know how to express it, but the fact that my children are well educated and have outgrown me makes me feel bad. I can't talk to them about my problems. They can't talk to me about theirs. It's as though there was a deep abyss that divides us. People envy me, my good, fine, educated children, but I'm ashamed to admit it. I often think it might be better for me if they were not so well educated, but ordinary working men like me. Then we would have more in common. I have no education because my parents were poor, and in the old country they couldn't give me the opportunities that I gave my children. That is my problem. I want to hear your opinion about it. I enclose my full name and address, but please do not print it. I will sign it as disappointed.
It is truly a pleasure to have such children, and the father can really be envied. But he must not feel that he has nothing in common with them any longer because they have more education than he. In thousands of Jewish immigrant homes, such educated children have grown up and many of them remain close to their parents. Also, there is no reason why the writer of this letter shouldn't be able to talk to his fine, good children about various problems, even though they are professionals and have outdistanced him in education.
1933. Dear Editor, though my husband is a Zionist and I used to be a Bundist, we have already celebrated our silver wedding anniversary and lived a quarter century happily together. We have been blessed with 5 good children. We sent them all to college, and they are all bright and cultured. 2 are already married. 1 goes to City College, and 1 has already graduated college. But he works in a department store and earns such poor wages, it's a shame to even talk about it. But even that job was hard for him to find. It is our 21-year-old daughter that I am writing to you about. She did something my husband cannot stand. She graduated college with high honors, and still she couldn't find a job. 2 months ago, she found a very good job at an insurance company. Now she brings home a check, $35 a week. We should be satisfied, yes? Instead, our world has turned upside down because in order to get the job, she had to say she was Episcopalian. She doesn't have typically Jewish features, and she could be taken as a Christian. These days, many girls are saying they're Christians in order to get jobs. She even had to get a letter from a priest so that the boss wouldn't think he was being fooled. Now our whole family is topsy-turvy and divided into 2 sides. My husband says she must give up the job. My daughter and the others, they say she hasn't committed a crime, she hasn't wronged anyone. Would going around jobless and having to go to her mother or her father for $1 be better? I side with my daughter. My husband is terribly upset. We would like your opinion on this. Your troubled readers, F and G.
The father is entirely right in his stand against his daughter's actions, but his feelings about it are not necessarily caused by his being a Zionist. A Jewish father, whether he is a socialist or a freethinker, would also be against having his daughter posing as a Christian to get a job. But the fact is, the girl is already 21. She certainly doesn't deserve a compliment for her dishonest behavior, but she has the right to act as she wishes. Companies who do not hire Jews despite their large Jewish patronage should be condemned.
$1909. Dear Editor, I'm writing to you as a reader of the forward. I'm writing to you about a matter that will interest other people too. But first, I'll tell you a little about myself. I'm 27 years of age. I've been in the country 10 years, and I'm still single. I've worked here at various trades, but never very long at one job. I enjoy traveling and seeing what's going on in the country. Now I've decided it's time to marry and settle down. I came to North Dakota, where most people make their living from farming, but there are no Jews in this area. I started to work on a farm, and I learned farming. I like this kind of life. And after working a year and a half, I rented a small farm for myself. My capital was small, but Gentile neighbors helped me. I went into debt for $1,300, but by the end of the summer, I had paid back almost all my debts. I wrote to a friend about joining me. He and his wife came, and we worked together. We carried on an independent life. I have none of the problems of city life because we always have our own potatoes, butter, cheese, milk, a good home, and are content. This winter, I went to Chicago to visit with friends. Most of my friends called me an idiot and told me they could not understand how a young, capable fellow like myself became a farmer. and lead such a lonely life. Of all the girls I knew who would have gladly married me before, not one was interested in going back to the farm with me. But this didn't discourage me. I returned to the farm, and I'm now preparing for the spring season. However, I want to ask, did my friends have the right to call me idiot? Is there any logic in that argument? Please answer me. Thank you. The Jewish farmer.
There is certainly nothing to be ashamed of in living in the lap of nature. Many people dream of becoming farmers. The cities are full of many diseases that are unheard of on farms. Tuberculosis, for instance, is a disease of the big cities. People in urban areas grow old and grey at 40, but most of the farmers are healthy and strong and live to be 80 or 90. Generally, it is a matter of choice. Debates between country people and city people about which have the better life are nothing new.
(1944). Worthy editor, I'll make this as short as possible. We have two grandsons, 9 and 7 years old. We take care of them because both their parents work very hard. They are strong, well-built boys who are doing very well in public school and in Hebrew school. So you would think everything is fine. But I have trouble with the older boy. About 9 months ago, he took it into his head to become a vegetarian and stopped eating meat. At first, I thought he was just tired of meat and in time would forget his vegetarianism. For a few weeks, I gave him other foods, then served him meat again. But he didn't touch it. Not only that, but as soon as he smells meat cooking, he refuses to go into the kitchen. We took him to a doctor who examined him and said he was all right. He told us to have patience with the boy, and in time he would begin eating meat again. But there is no end to it. He is stubborn. Not only does he refuse meat, but he doesn't even eat fish or sardines. He refuses to eat anything that was once alive. I'm afraid my grandson will grow up to be sickly if he doesn't eat meat. We took him and his parents to a restaurant so he could see everyone eats meat. But it didn't help. We are all afraid of what will happen to him. What can we do? Worthy editor, advise me what we can do. With thanks for your time, a worried grandmother.
The grandmother is advised to find out where her grandson got the idea to become a vegetarian. And then, with the help of a specialist, she might be able to bring him back to eating meat and fish. She is calmed and assured that a good doctor know how to treat a 9-year-old vegetarian, and in time, her grandson would begin to eat meat again.
Dear editor, a short time ago, your newspaper printed a letter from a grandmother who complained of her great misfortune that a 9-year-old grandson had become a vegetarian. The grandmother asked for your advice, and we wonder why you did not recommend her to us, the Jewish Vegetarian Society of New York. Instead of introducing her to the large family of vegetarians right here in New York, you advised that she take the boy to a doctor who would find a way to induce him to eat meat again. As a vegetarian for 30 years, who has raised 3 children as vegetarians, all in the best of health, I might add, I'm here to tell this grandmother that her fears of vegetarianism are unfounded. On the contrary, it is important that young children should eat less meat. I personally know doctors who say that children up to the age of 6 do not need meat at all. Not only in America, but all over the world, many vegetarians raise their children this way, especially in England. Now that there's food rationing because of the war, vegetarianism is widespread. The British food minister himself has on many occasions praised vegetarianism and implored the British people to enjoy and employ a vegetarian diet. Sincerely, the Jewish Vegetarian Society of New York.
Recently, I was sitting with a group of old friends who were speaking nostalgically about the good old days. I interrupted with the question, were the old days really so good?
I think when older people long for the old days and say it was better then, it's only because they were young and they still had their whole lives ahead of them. The truth is that those times, those old days, they weren't all that good.
I still remember my hometown in Russia, our simple little house, lighted at night by a small kerosene lamp. The door thatched with straw, nailed down with sackcloth to keep it warm in winter.
I still remember the streets so filled with mud, you couldn't even get around. In our fear of the Gentiles and the poverty, the days that there wasn't even a crust of bread.
When we came to New York, I thought we were entering heaven. But here in the new land, in those old days, we lived on the east side in tenements and had to climb to the 4th and 5th floors to tiny rooms that were dark and airless.
There were no bathrooms in those flats. A large bathtub stood in the kitchen near the old iron stove that was heated with coal, in which mothers also did the laundry.
In those good days, we worked in the shops 14 and 16 hours a day, and the bosses treated the workers like slaves.
Summertime, in the great heat, we couldn't breathe in the house at night. And we slept on the roofs or on the sidewalks.
When I think of all the modern conveniences we live with now, of all the wonderful inventions and achievements in various fields, and all the opportunities for everyone in this blessed country, there's nothing to be nostalgic about.
We now have the good times, and we do not have to long for the past.
So, what do you think? Are we in such good times that we should just be glad we are not back in Russia or the tenements of the Lower East Side? Or have we lost something that is good from those old days? a way of being together, caring for each other. You decide. Me, I'm still thinking about it.
I'm Carol. I developed and directed this from the book, A Bintel Brief, a collection that you can buy. And I chose selections which I hoped and thought you would enjoy or learn from, or it would elucidate the past or spring up your memories of your own parentage. Dear Anna, who read BV, The Widow, had a very strong comment about her character, which wasn't a character. Of course, these are all real letters. Yes. So, Anna.
I would ask that you not judge her too harshly. I know that it can be easy to do, but if you think about it, this was 1906. She's a widow, she has a daughter, and it's my understanding that in Jewish tradition at the time, it would have been any of her husband's unmarried brother's obligation to marry her. So at least with the man in the carriage, she knew him, she knew that he loved her husband, she knew that he loved her, and maybe in a way, by marrying him, she can also keep her husband's memory alive and the memory of that love together.
Her comment was an eye-opener for me because I was insisting on directing her as a harlot. Actually, I was very judgmental about her, and Anna opened my eyes. So I'm wondering what you all think about that character. Any comments?
Really
Did you trust? Would you
Why would it
trust
be
her?
anybody's business but hers?
Well, that's the
We
best
talk
thing to
now
say.
about the control of our bodies, whatever reasons that she has. It's her business, and she does not have to justify it. But I do have a question.
Yes.
I want to know if if you were part of the selection of your roles, or were they? Did you judge who should read which role, or did you have input into which story you wanted to tell?
They had no input.
So
I was
much
bossy.
for
I had already
self-determination.
decided. We had a wonderful open audition, and many people read many parts, and then I made my choices all by myself. Empirical decision.
They were so believable that I had to ask them.
And I wonder actually if they would have. Well, we're not going to talk about it.
I
Yes.
had a reaction just when I saw that one of the characters was a Jewish farmer. It was almost like an oxymoron in a way. And yet, Iowa was it? Or, no, North Dakota. I'm from Minnesota. I mean, I never met a Jewish farmer the whole time I was in college. But I was impressed, and I thought, boy, it must have been hard though if you only date Jewish girls.
Yes. Unfortunately, all we know about these people is the letter, each person's letter, and that's it. We don't know what became of him, but we certainly hope this dear Jewish farmer who's doing so well in North Dakota finds someone not from Chicago. You know, for goodness sakes, I'm from Chicago. I wouldn't have been like that. Yes.
Carol, I have a question for you. What were the years of the publication of the Jewish Forward?
The publication, the first one is 1907, and it goes to 1957, I believe. And then there's a second volume,
Right.
which is very much the children of the immigrants, writing about from 1957 through the 60s to the early 80s. So, but this first volume is what I used.
And it's still there. I mean, the forward's still being published,
Yes.
just online.
Yes,
So-
no longer in Yiddish, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I have a comment about the editor. I don't know if it struck anybody in the cast or you as editor or anybody in the audience, but his answers seem to be not very empathetic. I mean,
They are, well, that was interesting, because we discussed, Carol and I discussed, there are times when he's keeping a distance. I mean, this is, and sometimes he's wrong. I think, for instance, sometimes he's socialist and progressive. A woman has a right to go to school 2 evenings a week. It depends on who he's focusing on. He's very sympathetic to the woman who has to sell her children. And he actually offers, he says, readers, seek her out, help her out. He's very traditional when he's talking about the widow and that. So he's all over the place, and we discussed, is he always right? And I don't think he was always right.
Did any of you have any strong disagreements about his advice in any case? Yes?
I think we have to judge him by his times, and
Yes.
he was the editor, that this character was 1909 into the 1950s, so times change and things, the country changed, so
well, when
that's why it seems
the
different.
father who didn't feel comfortable talking to his educated children, instead of kind of saying, "Oh, it just seemed like you were negating." The editor was negating his feelings of inadequacy.
Yes, I think he was absolutely wrong. And I agree with Kahan on that. He's absolutely wrong to feel inadequate. This is why the immigrants came over, to give their children better educational things. And just because they're more educated than you doesn't mean you can't have a relationship with them. A lot of children who become educated have a relationship with their parents. I'm telling him, calm down. You can still talk to your kids. It's not it's not the end of the world.
But true too, that I think you were making a comment also that he is not being psychologically savvy. The editor. And this is before the development of psychology and psychiatry as a science, It wasn't, he's not, he's a good human, but he's not particularly insightful in that way. Yes.
Was it always the same, from 1906 to 1957, you said, or whatever it was?
As he says, at the first, how many years you edited?
He says first few years.
The first few years he edited everything himself.
And then started to have other answers.
I mean, he answered everything himself, right, but it in the volume, and no one could do the research, even at the forward, to tell me which ones were actually answered by Kahan.
Right, so
and I'm thinking, and I chose the most interesting to me,
Right.
Which were the most evocative. But we actually don't know if Kahan answered all the questions.
The answers are, as in newspapers today, it's the editorial board.
Yes.
So
there you are.
They're unassigned responses.
Who caught that letter?
Yeah. On the other hand, he was always the boss.
Right.
So we don't know how much leeway he was given, I guess.
It was interesting that the immigrants, and especially the Yiddish speaking, used him like Dear Abby. It was a Dear Abby thing. That was the first thing when I was looking at these.
Right.
And I guess you're in a new country with new practices and mores and whatever. So they felt most comfortable going to a landsman, to their own people who might understand their...
Who's spoken, and he makes that point. He says who they were desperate for support in their own language.
Yes.
Right.
And by their own people, in a sense,
By their
who
own-
were
of course
already
they're
here.
Yeah.
Who were here.
Yeah.
Who was their rabbi.
Yes.
I just wanted to say I thought the selection of letters was so perfect.
Thank
it was
you very
such
much.
a balance of humor and sorrow and modern, issues and everybody was very believable. Like I believed everybody that this was your story.
Thank you.
And what I loved about the editor was I thought you played the part so beautifully, but the editor was so human. Like, sometimes I really agreed with what you said, and I loved how succinct some of your answers were, and sometimes I didn't, but you were believable because you were very human and I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, I would love to have the opportunity to thank our producer who came on board as a willing volunteer and molded this whole show, Debbie Davis. To really see who handled all our reservations was Julie, who just so much gratitude to Temple Israel of Catskill, of whom the lady who just spoke, Zoe Zach, is the rabbi. Also very much to John and Stephen of this beautiful, terrific theater who were such gracious friends. Very much for coming. Get a copy of the Bintel brief and read it if you want. There are lots and lots of letters that I had to discard, that I wrestled with. But they're beautiful letters, and they evoke a time long past. And as a grandma, I'm unhappy that my grandkids they're not really savvy or passionately interested in the past. It seems like life started when they were born and nothing happened. It's good to look back. I can't think of any unhealthy elements of looking back. Yes?
Speaking to that point, I'm a teacher, and it's so, I'm just saying, like, for students to be able to witness history live in first person, with issues and topics that were important to the people at that time, and to hear it first person and live is amazing. And
Are you requesting an in-service?
I was going to say.
They're available.
Would you like to show up?
It would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
it would be great. I wonder which ones they would take to. I mean, they'd be surprised about the women's lib things.
Yes.
I'm thinking, even though they've heard it in the history books.
I'm sorry, sorry.
No, if I may speak to the defense of the younger generation.
Okay.
Some of it, as being a first generation, my family did not talk much about history. So it's also up to the elder, and yet I will add one other thing. As they get older, like I did, I started then on my own looking back.
Yes.
So don't lose faith. They may look to their history at some moment,
That's
maybe
true.
not here.
That's true.
I just want to speak to her point. There is only one, if I can think about it, there was only one actual historical event mentioned in this show. And that was the Triangle Fire.
Not the Holocaust. I avoided the Holocaust.
Yeah, which is because
I did.
That's so.
It's a whole other. Yeah.
But what was fascinating to me was in a way the mundane dilemmas, the little minor dilemmas are the more interesting thing. The attitudes that they had as the years went by, and the idea that they're all talking about, we are socialists and we feel that la 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 la, and now socialist is a dirty word. When back then it was a progressive movement.
Yes. Yes.
So,
did anyone have any strong feelings or opinions about the consumptive grandpa?
So modern.
Yeah.
COVID.
We're dealing with COVID.
I never even thought of that.
It was just
Yes.
so relevant.
Yeah. But in that case, we weren't even allowed to go near the grandchild unless you were in the bubble. Yes. I'm sorry. Yes.
The anti-Semitism in employment, education, up until recently, housing, and we have a group of people called Rusoff, which are an extraordinary example of anti-Semitism and the impact on the Jewish community throughout history. And it is telling, even in this community, I came as a kid to Greene County, Townsville. You could not go into certain communities, such as Oneonta Park. And in and education was a real problem. You saw it at the elite universities. Jews could not get in.
Yes.
They could not get into employment. They were excluded from the professions. Extraordinarily salient to this day when you have minority groups excluded from university settings.
Yes. And an answer to your comment as an educator that it is good to listen to and learn. Yes, absolutely.
And also, I remember, you know, to your point, I remember when we used to go to Miami for the Christmas vacation, and my parents would point out all the hotels that were restricted.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
Arthur Godfrey was
Yeah.
like a huge anti-Semite, and he had a hotel. And he would let us-
Yes.
Which is why you had the Catskills.
Right.
Why you had the Catskills.
Young man.
That's so weird.
Were there actually a lot of
Catskill, that's why Catskill.
Were there actually a lot of letters about the Holocaust or World War I or events, or was it mostly day-to-day?
It was mostly day-to-day in America, but there were letters post-Holocaust sufferings and wounds and scars. Yes, but to throw one in, I don't know, I didn't, I don't know, I can't really explain that. Actually.
Can I just add that one of the things that came up in doing this that we talked about was that it really didn't matter whether these stories were from 100 years ago, that immigrants who are here today in the past 10 years or 20 years face the same problems in adjusting. And we wanted to bring that out and really make people think about that. That although, you know, the issues are not identical, in some ways they're very similar, and we have to be aware of that.
Well, I just want to point to this, that I am a 1968 immigrant from Poland, where it's, you know, completely different circumstances, a lot of that, but you still have this Jewish immigration in 1968. And, you know, the stories are maybe, you know, the stories are different, but I think that even 100 years before, whatever we live today, you know, it's the same process, it's the same suffering, it's the same thing that's happening in the world all over again, you know, in every aspect.
Yes. It's important to me to have done this because of the universality of the immigrant experience, which is here and now and at our gates and in our country, and it's important. And in fact, I was just looking for where the nearest Ukrainians are right now, and they're in New Paltz. There's a great new Ukrainian immigrant community forming itself in New Paltz. For your information. Well, thank you so very much for coming.